Johnny Cash said, "Write me a song right now," and Bob Dylan reached for the guitar without a word. The melody born that night has lived for 50 years only in the memory of those who were in that room. Nashville. Winter 1969. Columbia Studios, Studio B. 3 in the morning. The session had ended hours ago. The engineers had gone home. The producers had left. The hangers-on and session musicians had filtered out into the cold Tennessee night, leaving behind only the smell of cigarette smoke and the particular silence that fills a recording studio after the music stops. Bob Dylan sat in the corner on a wooden stool, his acoustic guitar resting against his knee. He wasn't playing. Just sitting. Staring at nothing in particular. The way he often did when the weight of being Bob Dylan became too much to carry. Across the room, Johnny Cash leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching his friend with the quiet attention of someone who understood what it meant to be a symbol when all you wanted to be was a person. They'd been recording together for weeks. Dylan's Nashville Skyline sessions. Cash contributing vocals, lending his presence, two legends circling each other with mutual respect and unspoken understanding. But tonight felt different. Heavier. Like something unfinished hung in the air between them. Cash pushed off from the wall and walked over. He pulled up another stool, sat down facing Dylan. Close. The way you sit when you're about to say something that matters. You ever get tired of it? Cash asked. Dylan looked up. Tired of what? Being the voice of a generation you didn't ask to speak for. Dylan almost smiled. Almost. Every day since 1963. Cash nodded. Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable. Just heavy with shared understanding. Then Cash said something that would change the trajectory of that night, and in a small way, the trajectory of both their legacies. Write me a song. Right now. Not for a record. Not for anyone but me. Just write me something true. Dylan's fingers tightened slightly on the guitar neck. Johnny. I'm serious. No planning. No overthinking. Just you and 6 strings and whatever's sitting in your chest right now that you haven't let out yet. That's not how I work. I know exactly how you work, Cash said, his voice gentle but firm. You hide behind metaphors and you bury the real stuff so deep that by the time it comes out in a song, no one knows what you actually meant. Including you. Dylan was silent. So write me something you can't hide behind, Cash continued. Something that scares you to say out loud. Something you'll never put on a record because it's too true. Dylan didn't explain himself. He never did. Dylan looked at Cash for a long moment. Then, without a word, he adjusted the guitar in his lap. His fingers found the strings. Not searching. Just there. Like the chords had been waiting for permission. He played a single note. Let it hang in the air. Then another. Cash leaned back slightly, giving space. Watching. Waiting. What followed happened in 12 minutes. But to understand those 12 minutes, you need to understand what Bob Dylan was carrying that winter. He was 27 years old. He'd written, "Blowin' in the Wind," at 21. "The Times They Are A-Changin'," at 22. By 24, he'd gone electric and been booed by the people who'd made him a prophet. By 25, he'd survived a motorcycle accident that might have been an escape, or might have been fate's intervention. Now, at 27, he was trying to write simple country songs. Trying to disappear into Nashville's warm simplicity. Trying to be anyone other than Bob Dylan, voice of his generation, spokesman for the disaffected, prophet of change. But you can't outrun a mythology. Especially when you wrote the verses yourself. The night before this studio session, Dylan had received a letter. It was sitting in his guitar case, folded into a small square, read and reread until the creases threatened to tear the paper. The letter was from a college student in Ohio. A young man named Michael Brennan who had dropped out of school to avoid the draft, who had joined protests and sit-ins, who had carried Dylan's lyrics like scripture, who had believed, truly believed, that music could change the world. Michael's letter was 8 pages long. Handwritten. Desperate. It said, "I did everything you told us to do. I questioned authority. I refused to go along. I stood up for what I believed in. And now I'm sitting in my parents' basement at 23 years old with no degree, no job, no future, and a federal warrant because I wouldn't go to Vietnam. And I just need to know, did you mean any of it? Or were you just writing songs?" The letter ended with a question Dylan had been avoiding his entire career. Who gave you the right to tell us how to live when you were just trying to figure out your own life? Dylan had not replied to that letter. He didn't know how. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most important part of this story is still unfolding. In that studio at 3 in the morning, with Johnny Cash sitting 5 feet away and 50 years of unfinished business sitting in his guitar case, Bob Dylan began to play. The melody was simple. Sparse. Just fingerpicking, slow and deliberate, each note given space to breathe before the next one arrived. Cash didn't move. Didn't speak. Just listened. Then Dylan started to sing. Not the nasal protest voice. Not the electric sneer. Something else. Something quieter. More worn. The lyrics came out unfiltered. "I never asked to be your prophet. Never claimed to have the answers you seek. I was just a kid with a guitar and some anger. Trying to make sense of the words I couldn't speak." Cash's eyes closed. Not because he was uncomfortable. Because he understood. He'd carried the same weight in a different package. The man in black who sang for prisoners and outcasts, whether he wanted that mantle or not. Dylan continued. "You built me into something holy. Took my doubts and made them divine. Now you're angry that I'm human. Angry that I'm just trying to survive." The studio felt smaller. The walls closer. Like the room was contracting around this moment of brutal honesty. "I can't carry your revolution. Can't bear the weight of your belief. I'm just a man who wrote some verses." Now drowning in the mythology. Cash opened his eyes. There were tears on his face. He made no move to wipe them away. Dylan played another verse. Then stopped mid-chord. His fingers froze on the fretboard. The last note hung in the air, unresolved, aching for completion. "I can't finish it," Dylan said quietly. "Why not?" "Because if I finish it, I have to decide what it means. And I don't know yet." Cash leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "Maybe that's the point. Maybe some songs aren't meant to be finished. Maybe they're meant to stay questions." Dylan looked at him. Really looked. "You think that's honest? Leaving it unfinished?" "I think finishing it would be a lie," Cash said. "Because you don't have the answer yet. Maybe you never will. And that's okay." Away from the spotlight, Dylan made a choice no one expected. Dylan carefully set the guitar down. He reached into his case and pulled out Michael Brennan's letter. He handed it to Cash without explanation. Cash read it slowly. All 8 pages. When he finished, he folded it carefully and handed it back. "Are you going to answer him?" "I don't know what to say." "Tell him the truth. Tell him you were 21 and scared and you wrote some songs. Tell him you never asked to be a prophet. Tell him." Cash paused, choosing his words carefully. "Tell him that the bravest thing anyone can do is admit they don't have all the answers." Dylan took the letter back. Stared at it. "That song I just played. That's the answer, isn't it? That's what I'd say if I knew how." "Then say it." "I can't put that on a record. Can't release it. People would." "I'm not asking you to release it," Cash interrupted gently. "I'm asking you to finish it. For you. For Michael. For everyone who put weight on your shoulders you never agreed to carry. Finish it, and then decide what to do with it." Dylan picked up the guitar again. His fingers found the chords. He played the unfinished verse again, and this time, he didn't stop. He pushed through to the ending. "So if you're angry at the prophet, if you feel betrayed by the man, remember I was never holy. Just human, with a guitar in my hands. And if my songs gave you courage, that courage was always your own. I just wrote down what I was feeling. You're the one who made it stone. So I'm giving back this mantle. This crown I never wanted to wear. You can keep your revolution. I'm just trying to breathe the same air. The last chord hung in the studio's silence. Neither man spoke for nearly a minute. Finally, Cash stood. He walked over to a table in the corner, picked up a small notebook, the kind he carried for lyrics, and brought it back to Dylan. "Write it down," Cash said. "All of it. Exactly as you just sang it. Johnny. Not for posterity. Not for Columbia Records. For Michael. Write it in this notebook. And tomorrow, you mail it to him with a note that says this is the answer. It's yours now. Do with it what you need." Dylan stared at the notebook. Then, slowly, he took it. He wrote for 15 minutes, occasionally humming a phrase to get the lyric right, scratching out words and rewriting them. When he finished, he tore the page from the notebook and folded it carefully. He looked at Cash. "What about the song? Do I record it?" Cash shook his head. "No. That song belongs to this room. To this moment. Some things are too true for tape. What followed stayed with everyone who witnessed it, long after the sound faded." Dylan mailed the handwritten lyrics to Michael Brennan 3 days later. He never heard back. He never knew if Michael received them, or what he did with them if he did. But 6 months later, Dylan's manager mentioned in passing that a young man named Michael Brennan had shown up at the office. He'd left an envelope. Inside was a note, written on the back of Dylan's lyrics. "Thank you for being honest. I'm going back to school. I don't know if music can change the world, but I know it helped me understand mine." Dylan kept that note in the same guitar case where he'd kept Michael's original letter. He carried both for the rest of his career. The song itself, the one written that night at 3 in the morning, witnessed only by Johnny Cash, was never recorded. Never performed. Never released. Cash told 3 people about it before he died: his wife June, his son John, and a young songwriter named Jason Isbell, who asked Cash once what the most honest song he'd ever heard was. "Bob wrote me something once," Cash had said. "That was so true he could never let anyone else hear it. But I heard it. And it changed how I thought about what we do." Isbell asked if he could hear it. Cash smiled. "Some songs aren't meant to be passed on. They're meant to live in memory. To exist as a reminder that not everything needs to be consumed. Some art is just communion between the person who makes it and the person who witnesses it." Share and subscribe. Some stories deserve to be remembered. Bob Dylan turned 83 in 2024. He's still touring. Still writing. Still refusing to explain himself. Johnny Cash has been gone since 2003. The notebook where Dylan wrote the lyrics that night. Cash kept it in a locked drawer in his home studio. After June died, their children found it. They read the page. They understood immediately why their father had kept it private. They burned it. Per June's explicit written instructions. The song, the full version of the melody and lyrics that emerged in 12 minutes at 3 in the morning, exists now only in the memory of one man. And Bob Dylan has never sung it again. Not because he forgot it, but because some truths are too heavy to carry in public. And sometimes, the bravest thing a prophet can do is admit he was just a person trying to survive his own mythology. The notebook was burned. The recording was never made. The song lives only in memory. Bob Dylan still carries Michael Brennan's thank you note in his guitar case. Over 50 years later, the paper is nearly transparent from being folded and unfolded, read and reread. When asked once in an interview about songs he'd written but never released, Dylan paused for a long time. Then he said, "Some songs aren't meant to be heard. They're meant to be felt. And once they're felt, they've done their job." Johnny Cash took that secret to his grave. The song that was too true for tape became a legend precisely because it remained unheard, a reminder that not all art needs an audience. Sometimes communion between two people in a dark room at 3 in the morning is enough.